Hello, everyone. Welcome to this podcast. I'm your host, Betty Wang. I'm a financial advisor who specializes in helping women with investing and planning for their retirement. Today, I want to talk about something that affects all working women, and that is the gender pay gap. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, women earn on average 82 cents for every dollar earned by men, gross. So, how can we as women know if we're being paid less than our male counterparts? How can we educate ourselves and advocate for ourselves in the working world? To talk about this, I'm so happy to introduce Tori Finucane. She's a senior compensation consultant at a large retailer in the Northeast with over 20 years of experience in the big wide world of compensation. One comment on her LinkedIn page says Tori's knowledge of global compensation programs, job markets, bonuses, and incentive programs is impressive. She has a contagious passion for her work and does a great job advocating for employees' pay, ensuring that it is competitive. Also, Tori is one of my oldest and dearest friends from high school. So please welcome Tori and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Betty. I'm so happy to be here. I um, really am so excited that you're starting this journey with the podcast. I think that you have such great information to share with a wider audience. You've always given me the best advice. So I will always listen to what you have to say. But I truly am passionate about this topic, and I apparently owe whoever posted that on my LinkedIn something. Truly nice words. But it is an area that I have been really passionate about because it does matter, and it is important. And so I do feel that satisfaction from my work, and certainly when it comes to gender and inequities. I think that there's a lot of important things to talk about in that space. And honestly, in my career, I've found that, compensation can be a little mysterious. How do companies actually figure out what to pay their people? Where does this come from anyway? And there certainly is a long and storied history on pay and compensation and pay programs and how they develop. And we can get into all of that. But suffice it to say, I think that a lot of people just don't know
Yeah, it is sort
the
of
information.
put it behind a curtain and you show up at HR or with your manager and they sort of tell you, but you don't know how the sausage is made, I guess.
No, and what's even worse is that if we're it, women of a certain age, employees of a certain age, we remember a time when that was a taboo topic. You didn't even
Oh,
ask
yeah.
what the job was paying. You went to the interview and you showed your interest, and by asking about pay, you were showing that maybe you weren't interested in that job. That wasn't putting your best foot forward. And so there's been a lot of legislation as of late that really forces employers' hands to say, you need to tell people what you're paying for this job. Colorado, in particular, has some landmark legislation on that.
Oh,
Um,
that's
and,
really
and
great to know.
yes, exactly. It really, like I said, forced our hand. And they sort of, I guess you could say, speak from the employer's point of view, that they warned us that hey, if you're going to hire anyone in Colorado, you need to like make sure that you've got a pay range. You need to make sure that you tell them what the job is paying before you offer them a position, ideally before you even talk about it. And so that was they were first in that space, and it's a lot of states have followed suit, and it's great to see. So from an employee's perspective, it's great to see that people are being held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, that brings me to a question I remember. I mean, interviewing, you were always supposed to be prepared for what, if they ask you what your dollar amount, what your expected salary is. I
Hmm.
mean, how do you, what should we do? I mean, I think I've
Yeah.
read you're supposed to give a range, but how do you come up with that range? Where do you find the resources to even know what's out there?
Well, and that's a great question. It is mysterious, and it's not an exact science either, of course, as nothing is. But it goes back to sort of fundamentally understanding that your skills and your knowledge is a commodity in the workplace, just like anything in the free market. And it has value. The things that you know and the things that you can bring to a position are valuable. Um, and certainly the company wants to get that skill and experience for the least amount possible. And of course, you're in a position where you'd like to sell that skills and experience for the most amount possible. And so, how do you come to that agreement and make something work? There's been some research that says women in particular, will just take what is on offer. Right?
Yeah.
We're not going to push back. We're not going to talk about it's uncomfortable space for us.
100%. Yeah.
We don't, we don't assign a value to the things that we can bring to the table a lot of times, and certainly don't feel like we're in a position to advocate for ourselves when we are talking with an employer, future employer. So starting from that perspective, and when I coach people, and especially young women, I say, know your worth. Know what these skills and experience go for in the free market. And then you are in a better bargaining position. You know what jobs to look for. And you know when they come back to you with an offer that you've got a little bit of a knowledge base to go back to the negotiating table and really try to up that. So how do you start? What's great about pay transparency legislation, which is what they're calling it now, pay transparency, as you can imagine, means being transparent about the pay that a company is offering for the job that you're applying to. And a lot of that makes them, and if it doesn't, if they're not in a state where it makes them, they maybe operate in the state where that's the law. So that's just a company policy now, is to always put the pay range on the job description, on the job posting. And I would have to say, through my professional development, that I've seen a lot of companies, while they were hesitant at first, they are embracing it now to just make that a policy, that for all postings going forward. So I hope people are embracing it. I'm seeing it, and I hope I'm right. And that, so just starting right there. There's Google is your friend, right? I'm a professional in this space, and I pay a lot of money for for a lot of data, where I can help my company make pay decisions. But you, as an employee going into that space, I mean, Google's your friend, and I still use it too. There's jobs people ask me to provide compensation on that I've never even heard of. So I have to research myself. And it's not an exact science, but there is information out there. What does a software developer, pay in at this certain level with this level of experience, and the factors that are going to, and Google will tell you, but the factors that will change that level of pay, geographic region is one of the most important. So I'm sure we all familiar with the concept cost of living, right? So, the East Coast, West Coast, and then in the middle, they're going to have different costs of living. That does translate to some degree into a cost of labor. They're not hand in hand necessarily, but they do tie. So your geographic region's going to make the most difference. So if you Google, hey, what does a software developer make in San Francisco versus Miami, Florida, then you could get different numbers. And that's
What
why.
about for virtual or hybrid, or are you just seeing less and less of that? Do compensation analysts just take an average?
So that's definitely been a big topic in the space. I would say most times, and whether this is the right way to do it or not, time will tell. But it's going to be where that company is located,
Mm.
where their headquarters are located. Because that's who's deciding the pay. But if I just put out, I need a software developer and I don't care where you're working, and I'm paying $100,000, that's probably not going to elicit interest in certain areas of the country that have a higher cost of living, because I'm going to have an applicant in California say, that's not pay
Yeah.
that I can work for. So I don't think it's an exact science yet. We haven't emerged with like a best practice in that space since it's such a new phenomenon. But I am seeing that the geographic differentials are lessening to some degree. And we'll see how that takes place, over it'll perfect itself, I'm sure, over the next few years. The other factor that's going to be really important, and most job postings will have this included, is the years of experience for the position. And certainly the minimum years of experience required to do that job is going to give you the best indication of where that position is going to be leveled in the company's pay range. So something that asks for 1 to 3 years of experience, that's more or less an entry level professional job. And that's great if that's what you bring to the table. That's going to be lower in their pay scale. And that can be indicated by certain words in the job title. You may see some jobs, and this is true in the IT world, software developer 1, then 2, then 3. And the difference between those typically is years of experience. So the more experience you have in your career, the more you can expect to be paid for that. And the more
So,
I, as a company, am going to pay for that.
so if we're looking at, this podcast is for women over, let's say, 45. So they're in their industry, they have the years experience. When they're looking at the range of salaries, I mean, I think most women would say, well, I'll just tell them the middle, right? Because we're humble, we don't know what to do. Like, what do you recommend there? Um, Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off from, location and years of experience, but let's say everyone has 20, let's 15, 20 years of experience in their career, their industry. What are they looking for that?
So then that offers another challenge because as you do further your career, you're going to have developed skills and experience in probably a specific function. So say you've spent your whole career in marketing roles, and you've gotten to a certain level. um, Depending on what you're looking for, do you need to switch jobs? Are you looking to tap into a different industry? um, you're going to have to identify for yourself what your transferable skills are going to be, and understand that, especially when you've built such a good portfolio for yourself, that they're going to be a lot more valuable in the marketplace. I will have to say that you might not have a full indication of what that job is going to pay just by looking at the job posting. There's a lot more factors at that level, that go into your full total, what we call a total compensation package. That's not made up of just your base pay at that point. Typically at this level, and, when I say level, you are either at an expert level by this point, you've been 20 years in your career, you are a manager, a director, a VP, you run a function. Um, and just having a good sense of what all you bring to the table, is a great starting point. Match that with your job posting, and more often than not, that job's going to come through with an offer that's going to be fair to you. And I say that because um, employers have a really good understanding of what people in your position make at different companies. Like I said, there's a lot of data for us, available out there. So I can say a vice president of marketing for this kind of industry, and that also makes a difference, is what kind of industry you're looking at, because different industries pay differently. Um, is going to have a base pay of X and a variable pay package or a total compensation package of Y. And if companies are a good company, they're going to be on top of it and be able to bring that to the table. But again, matching your skills with the available posting is more often than not going to allow you to have a similar level of earnings that you're used to, that you've become accustomed to, because they do have a good sense of what that position should be paying.
Do most companies have a compensation analyst?
I would say so, certainly at a certain size.
Yeah.
Some smaller companies, maybe companies up to maybe about 500 employees, may just have a few HR people that are more or less generalist in these functions. But one of them guaranteed is going to be knowledgeable in the compensation space and is responsible for setting pay rates for that company. So it is a typical practice, a typical function of HR.
And so you're in the tricky role of balancing wanting to make sure your people are paid and also the company's bottom line, right? I mean,
Right.
that's delicate.
Yeah, it is. It is a fine balance, because I've got to kind of be that go between, and certain companies, I find that a lot easier to do. So certain companies that have leadership that their people matter, and they understand that labor is an investment in their company. That if we are paying at the right level, that we are going to get good, committed people to talent to join our company and work hard for us. So the best employers do that.
Yeah.
And it makes my job easier when they're able to do that. What I do for them is to offer them perspective and say, hey, this is maybe an area where we should look at investing in our people. The pay rates have gone up in this function. We are finding, and sometimes I even get these tips from our recruiting folks, because they'll say, you know what, nobody's biting at this pay rate, or I'm not finding what I'm looking for because we've posted the job at X rate. So if we want to get the talent that we're looking for in the door, and someone that can really help us in this function and grow this function, and help us be the best in class employer, then we're really going to need to up it. And so I can go back to the drawing board and look and see what we can do to make that position more attractive. So we are constantly playing, a balancing act. Very rarely, I think companies will say, no, that's not a good investment, or that's not where. Sometimes they just say, we simply can't do that. We're just going to have to operate. We're just going to have to do more with less. But if they're in a position to grow their business, they understand that as an investment, and will help make my job a little easier.
And just, I mean, with AI, we're reading about people just doing their resume on AI, and that companies are just looking through the resumes with AI. How have you seen that affecting things at these higher levels?
Hmm.
Or is going back through, I mean, I remember when, I mean, way back when you and I,
Back
we
in the
would go to
day.
recruiters, and Tori was a recruiter in her previous life. Um, like, is that the best way to now get your foot in the door, because there's a person to person relationship? Because it seems like, from my understanding and what I've read, if you send your resume into a company, it's AI's reviewing it.
So a lot of what they call applicant tracking systems that companies use will include some of these, what they'll call bells and whistles, to make your job easier, and that includes screening resumes. Even prior to AI, it was um, questions that you might be asked as an applicant, and the answers to those questions would dictate whether or not you got sent to a recruiter's actual eyeballs, an actual human person to review you. And now AI is just sort of filling in that gap. If you say, it'll take a job description and it'll take your resume and see if that's a match. I even get, I'm sure a lot of people do, if you use LinkedIn, it'll say, hey, you're an X% match to this position. That's using the same kind of philosophy or approach. Does that exclude someone from being reviewed? In my company, I would say no, because we wouldn't rely on such a I'll call it inhumane tool to look at our talent and review our talent. I know for a fact that every resume is reviewed, even if AI says this is a better match or a less good match for your role. So I wouldn't be so scared of that space. In AI in general is helping people do their work a lot better. Even my experience with AI, my tools have AI to say, hey, you want to find compensation for this job? Here's a good match, and here's what this job might pay, without me even looking at it.
Oh,
Very different than
a little
how it used to
scary.
operate. It's very
Yeah.
scary. But I know I use my experience and knowledge to intervene in that and say, whether or not I think they're right. Um, so I think it could be a useful tool, but I have not seen it yet take over from the human aspect of that. I think we still are able and capable of making human decisions, and if if what you do is important to you, you'll always have that tie.
And I would imagine with managers or um, expert level directors that that's even more so the case because there's less applicants, that there's human eyes looking at it.
Absolutely. And
I
when
mean,
you're talking about, yeah, higher level positions, you are talking about people who can really change the face of your company or that function. If you have a position opening at that level, it's very critical to your whole operation. So you're down logistics director. I mean, you're struggling, right? That's a critical need to fill for your company. And the other thing I would say about that is that just applying, typically, unfortunately, isn't always the best way. That you hear a lot about networking. We have a lot, especially since the recession. I feel like that's become more important since 2008. I'm dating myself, but where
God, you're
when
so
jobs,
old.
my God,
You're 2 days older
I've
than
been,
me.
I know, I know.
No.
We've just been at this game a lot. We've seen a
Yeah.
lot of things, Betty, you and I.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
totally.
and it just really changed the way I saw, people getting hired, selected, what they were paid. It was very much an employer's game because the jobs were so few and far between. You had to network, you had to really get out there and meet people and learn about the business. And I would say that has not gone away. That's still going to be your best way to put your foot forward. LinkedIn is a great tool. You can network with people just from, the comfort of your own house. Um, but finding those people that do what you want to do and other people that do that same thing, just to even offer advice, even if they don't have a position open, that's always going to be a great way and something I always talk about in when I'm coaching, career coaching folks. Um, is that's always going to be really important, and it helps you. It helps you to find out what is about this role, what speaks to me about it. What are some of the things I should know about it that um, are going to help or hinder me as a candidate, as an applicant for this role. So I would never discount that. AI, shmai, because
You heard it
that's
here
never
first, folks.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to take the place of that human interaction. I do truly still believe that. So
It's just because we're old.
it could be a generational thing.
No, I think so too,
It
but
really could be, but if we're speaking to like-minded folks, I would
yes.
say that. And I've seen company. I actually do think that there's, a good hard fast data to prove our point. But you you saw this complete shift to fully remote work, right? The
Yeah.
pandemic, and then you saw companies slowly trying to bring people back in. And I joined a new company that was fully remote at the time. And the experience was vastly different. And I almost felt sorry for some of the young women that were coming into my team, not having had the experience of having a job in an office uh, with
Humans.
colleagues, with the water cooler talk. Yeah. And uh, someone you might, brush past or enter into a conversation with someone that, really can help you in your career, offer great advice, where you set up a Zoom meeting, it doesn't have the same effect, or you might not even have that opportunity because you were never in a Zoom meeting with a person that might be an important um, mentor to you. So the companies started realizing that, and that their company culture, but the younger workforce was craving that, and the company culture was really suffering from some of those policies. Now, does it help us work better, faster? Are some people, you know, I never want to go back into the office another day in my life. Sure. And there's a way that we can balance all of that. So that hybrid approach that most companies are taking has been really the best solution, I think, with all of this, because they really truly are finding that people do their best work when they do it together.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think some of the best advice I received was running into someone in the ladies' room, right?
Right. Right. And if
Just
somebody was in my ladies' room and off my kitchen, I'd be a little scared. It's just
no,
not going to
it
happen
is
in certain
different.
environments, right?
Yes, it is definitely different working in a silo, right, at
Hmm.
home by yourself. And talking about compensation, what else should we be looking at other than purely salary, target bonus? I mean, a lot of my clients have RSUs or some sort of equity comp. What are you seeing out there that people should consider? I mean, I know that sometimes people feel like working from home or being hybrid is is not a given, so they're trying to negotiate that because especially we as women, we have a lot of other priorities, right? Kids, aging parents,
Hmm.
floods in our house, all these
Yeah.
sorts of things, right? Just
Yeah. This past
there's a
week for
lot.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So there is a lot. So just remember, I mean, when you go into you want to get a dress for a wedding, you don't go into one store and just pick from what they have to choose from, right? We might look in a lot of different areas for the right fit. And that's always something that you need to keep in mind.
how many
So
times have you used that
you
analogy?
know what? I
I
think
was
that
like,
just
that's a
kind of
good
came
one.
to me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been practiced.
I don't know. I done a lot of career coaching in my life. I'm sure I'm full of them. But I think it's a good visual to have. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
it's just
absolutely
not a
good.
one size fits all. You don't see
Right.
that one company or that one day you got frustrated with your boss, so you went on, LinkedIn and applied to it. But that's not what's ever going to be there. If you really are committed to progressing your career and to a career search, you will look over a period of time, and over that period of time, you'll find that and kind of have a short list. I have a teenager now. I know you do too. That's looking at colleges, right? This you don't just say, hey, I feel like applying to this school today, and let's just cross our fingers. It's a long process of seeing what's going to work for you, what's going to help you be successful. So kind of prior to this, job search, have that in your mind. In that, these are the things I'm really looking for. I've been working long enough that I understand that this is the right environment. This is I love having a a performance bonus, because that helps drive my performance. Look for something that has that. Certain industries, you've at this point in your career have developed a skill set and a knowledge of certain industries, and use that to your advantage. That might cut out some other industries from your search. Um, there was a point in my career when I had interviewed for a financial institution, and during the interview, they told me that the dress was very professional. I couldn't see that for myself. Financial industries, it pays a lot of money. It's a great industry for the right person. I
I
couldn't
have a
see
lot
myself
of suits.
doing
Yeah,
that.
I still you
Yes.
remember I have a lot of suits.
Yeah.
My armor for sure.
Well, and that is appealing to some people. My good friend here, she's worked in finance her whole life, loves getting a suit on and her heels.
I don't wear them yet anymore.
Yeah. I,
I'm a
and
different kind of financial professional.
well, and you found a niche for yourself, and that's great, and you could do the other if that fit with your lifestyle or your career goals, but you're not. And just be honest with yourself about
Yeah.
what you're looking for, and that list will narrow itself down for you. Um, at this point, sometimes we can only peddle our wares in places that we've worked at before, and I don't places, but industries that we're familiar with. We're going to be more attractive to them because we've spent 10 years in pharmaceutical sales or something like, something similar. Um, so keep that in mind, and just understand what your own goals are so that you can find the right fit. And then another thing I always tell people is that during the interview, you're interviewing them too, right? You want to know, is this the place I'm going to blood, sweat, and tears for? Do they have my same priorities? Do they share my same passion? Do they have a vision that I can align myself with? So I say none of that talks about pay, right? But I think it's critical for having job satisfaction. Um, I've seen people really burn out fast if they say, well, I took the job for the pay, but it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. I'm going to go to a job for it's a lower pay and I'm going to be happier. And you've heard people make those decisions. I've made that decision myself at different times in my life. Um, so it's not just about pay, but if it is about pay, now what you can do is, again, going back to understanding the value of your skills and experience. And I don't want to say that that's just a Google search. That is networking. That is talking, maybe with a compensation professional that you might know in your life that you can reach out to. Um,
If they don't
and
know anybody, like I'm fortunate to know you. Although I've never actually asked you for myself. I probably should have.
hmm,
But like are there like for financial planning, there's for certified financial planner. Is there like something similar for you? Because maybe you don't want to go to your compensation analyst if your company happens to have one.
sure,
Is
sure.
there some sort of accreditation that they should be looking for?
So, there are going to be different people in the space that do consulting work. Do they do it for applicants? No, they typically do it for companies. But those are the same people that will be able to tell you, hey, your skills are worth this in the marketplace. And they're called certified compensation professionals. CCP is what it's called. And it's offered through an organization called World at Work. And again, while this is an organization primarily with an audience of compensation analysts, compensation professionals, I think just anybody would get some value out of some of the articles that they have listed, some of the information that they have posted, and they certainly do have a referral for professionals.
I mean, I remember helping a client through her negotiation, and I went on Indeed and I Googled, and then I also went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it'll break it down by wage, but it's just the average. So it's really like I feel like it doesn't really give you enough information to
Well, and I
feel
think that's,
like
yeah,
okay, right?
no, that's true. And what a compensation professional is trained to do is to break through some of that noise and understand what number is meaningful and what one isn't. So what number applies to you in this role, to kind of break through that noise a little bit. Hey, if we're talking about your listeners, they can always reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So please provide
Thank
my
you.
contact information. Um, but having said that, what you're looking for in a pay package, and we haven't really touched on this, is that it's going to be broken down into different components. Primarily, you're going to get your base pay. Base pay is based on what those skills, experience, and abilities are worth in the marketplace and the value they have to the company. So that's what your compensation person is doing, is evaluating, hey, we need to pay this amount. And in our company, those skills are valued X or similarly to this person. So we're going to develop a range around that. That's going to be about this amount. Where should you target your salary within that range? Right at the top, girl. I mean, go for gold. There's nothing to say that, you won't, if you, um,
Do you think that, I mean, I think that'd be uncomfortable for a lot of women. I know that I would be uncomfortable. Like, is that, we'd feel like we are going to put them off, right? That we're just greedy.
sure.
Is that coming from the other side, from your perspective? Do you ever feel like that when you get a response like, I think I deserve this? Or
No,
you,
absolutely not. I mean, if you've
do
done
you
your homework
expect
and
it? Yeah.
I absolutely expect it. So I would say to anybody out there that has that sort of hang up to say, don't have it, because what a company is doing with that range is saying, we fully expect to pay this full amount. However, we're going to protect ourselves. And what we're protecting ourselves from is to say, the person sitting next to you, has X amount of experience and has paid this amount. So what we feel your internal position in our company should be is at this amount. So they may come back and say, hey, um, with this position, we're able to offer you X amount. We'd like to see you grow in the position before we can get you to the top of the range. Are you comfortable with that? um, I would still say no. I would still say no. I really, my skills are really valuable. I bring a lot of experience to your company, and I think I can make a huge impact. And I'd really like to be considered for the top of the range, because they are able to pay that, or they wouldn't have put it out there.
Hmm.
So that's something, a little nugget to keep in mind.
Inside tip.
Yes.
So like, what are your recommendations to, let's say you find out that I mean, what are you seeing out there that are, I'm sure it's not your company, of course, but are you seeing that the pay gap is lessening? Because it sounds like studies out there are showing that it's very, very slow to lessen.
So it is slow, and I mean, as a analyst and as a researcher, if someone who works with data a lot, I always have to consider the source of,
Yeah,
of some of that information,
sure.
and it's important to know where it comes from. Are we talking about the same level jobs? Are we talking about C-suite jobs? Women haven't been accessing that. You know, for as long as men have been able to.
Right.
So if you're comparing those jobs, you just don't see a lot of visibility yet. It is a slow burn because that's a position that takes 20, 30 years in the workforce to get to. 20, 30 years ago, that woman was at a clear disadvantage from her male counterparts. And we've come a long way since then. When I was doing I used to do a program for college graduates about pay negotiation and the gender pay gap. And the thought of this program was that if we can educate women, in this same way to know their worth and be able to talk about pay, and we can get them in a better position throughout their career. And I don't think that's wrong. It's just that throughout their career, that's decades. so so we do have a little ways to go. But when I was doing that, I will have to say that it was 73 cents. And
Oh.
so if we're looking at something in the 80s, it sounds icky poo, but it still is better, the lot better than where we've come from. And we can be proud of that. And I think the laws are moving in the right direction. Transparency is definitely moving in the right direction. I mean, our women coming into the workforce now, they're demanding answers. They want information, and they are holding companies accountable to provide that. And I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the world's a better place for the women behind us, or hopefully, right? Just
Hmm.
like we were in a better place than the women that came before us. What about the us? So, right? Like,
Sure.
so
Right.
we've probably already had some years of making less than our male counterparts. How do you how do you frame the negotiation? What would be your advice for us to go into, let's say you're in a company for a long time and you feel underpaid, especially compared to maybe not even just to your male counterparts, but to
Hmm.
what's out there in, you know, in the market? Because I mean, we see that when somebody's been loyal to a company for a long time, the company doesn't have to pay up to keep you there. It's and women are not known to ask for more money, but what would you say to them if they say, wow, I really am underpaid? How should they approach the conversation? What are the steps they should take?
Sure. So, I mean, if you are in a position where you do want to stay at your current employer, the same sort of things apply. Know your worth. Know where you, um, know what your skills are going for in the marketplace, and then use that as to sort of bolster your negotiation, your position. Um, think also too about your career trajectory. Are you looking to advance to another level? It's not often about pay, but what can I do to get there? So asking a mentor, asking, somebody who's in a position above you, what can I do to broaden my skill set so I can get to the next level? If you don't see yourself at the next level in your company, you might want to look elsewhere so that you can see yourself advancing. So that's one thing. That's a piece of career advice I give a lot of people that are asking about money is making sure that you are maximizing your earning potential, and that's getting to higher level jobs. That's one way to do it. Another way is just to simply ask and say, you know what, not for nothing, but and I actually am guilty of doing this too, because it's actually true. With the information that we get constantly, I might get a LinkedIn message with um, information about a new job, and the posting on there will say, "Hey, you could make up to this amount." Um, and if you're not making that amount, that's maybe one clue that if that's something that happens to you, that if and you're not at that amount, but that's an easy conversation with a manager to say, "Hey, do you mind if I just bend your ear about something? I've I found out, or I've looked at, or I was given information about this, or I have a friend in another company that's this," and say, it just concerns me that I might not be maximizing my earnings here. What are some ways I can do that? Is there a function by which we can have my pay and my grade looked at? Because there oftentimes is. And that's, again, behind the curtain stuff that you might not be aware of. There's absolutely a function that will look at your pay, and make sure that the company's being paid fair. You're being paid fairly in that company. And a lot of the states with the pay transparency laws, if your company isn't being transparent, the law is now holding them accountable to be transparent. So they have to disclose a pay range for your position. And if you find that you're lower in that pay range than you think you should be, I've been doing this job for 5, 6 years. What does it take to move into the higher into the pay range? There's absolutely someone that can look at that for you. So understand that. And again, it's not about base pay. You want to look at bonuses. You want to look at and what are the factors to maximize that bonus? Is there an individual performance factor? Then hey, make sure that you understand what levers can be pulled to maximize that performance lever. And hopefully a good boss will be able to explain that to you. Um, Companies have goal setting processes, performance management processes, performance evaluations, and it usually, at least in my company, I know at least one time a year, your pay and your total compensation is being looked at and rewarded and changed, hopefully for the better. And so those are great times to have this conversation with somebody who's you're able to have a conversation with, whether it's your boss. If you don't feel comfortable there, go right to your HR rep.
Are there other things that we haven't talked about today that you think are important for people to know?
Well, you asked about RSUs and equity that a company may provide um, for as part of your compensation package. And then I kind of transitioned it to be like, hey, look for an employer that's a good fit for you. And what I meant to sort of tie that into is to say, companies operate differently, especially if they're a private company, a public company, a nonprofit company, not company, but a nonprofit, organization or institution. I worked in higher ed for about 10 years of my career. Those compensation plans are drastically different than what you're going to see in the corporate world, right? Um, so there's going to be different kind of offerings depending. I mean, you might get to a point like yourself. You're um, a an independent, person who, no one's dictating your, salary. So maybe that applies to you. You're an independent practitioner. So, but know what kind of pay package is going to be meaningful for you, and go after that. So don't expect a public company that provides, annual performance bonuses and RSUs. If you switch out of that and go to hey, I'm going to go to a startup company where I can really like put my stamp on things, and that's going to be a very different pay program.
Yeah.
So know yourself and kind of put down your wish list of how do I see myself getting paid, what's important to me, and look for companies that fit that mold.
That's really good advice. I don't know when you became so smart.
I was probably the day I met
Yeah, probably. Probably. I just wasn't smart enough to know it.
you.
Since this is a podcast for women and of a certain age, all of us are struggling with life changing. How do you personally deal with keeping your sanity or keeping yourself centered?
Oh gosh. So that's probably not something I've learned to do yet.
Well, that's why I'm asking. Just to say, I
Yeah,
think we're all
exactly.
thinking about it, right? Like, and something that works for one person might work for another.
Sure. Um, so I actually I have to give my kids credit for this because a lot of times d- we don't practice what we preach, and we'll say things.
Huh, yeah.
Gee, I don't know if that sounds familiar to everybody, but do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. Where I might ask them about their day, and I get it's fine,
Yeah.
nothing. I actually tell them about my day, and it helps me reflect on some of the things that maybe I accomplished in my day. Well, guess what? I was telling them about coming on the podcast today, and that I was excited about it. And I'll tell them how it went later, and hopefully they'll ask. But even if they don't, I will tell. So I kind of like to. I'm like I ask them to share with me, and I'm not sharing some of the things that maybe I did that I'm proud of that
Yeah.
day, or and that's something that honestly just dawned on me in the last few months, having one word answer teenagers. I'm like, gosh, how can I get them to talk more? I could talk more about myself too. They might
Yeah.
not care or listen, but I've found in the process that it's helped me to sort of reflect and
Oh,
feel
that's
good about some of
nice.
the things that,
Yeah. Well,
that
and
I've been
you're
able
a
to do.
natural sharer.
Probably overshare, but
No,
yeah.
it's a good thing. And the other thing I'm curious about is, I deal with a lot of people or with women retiring, and the studies show that, what a huge factor in whether you're content in retirement is if you have a passion or a hobby that can sort of not to take the place of work, but occupy your mind and your time and your energy. And, I'm in the market for a new hobby. What do you do for fun?
Excellent. I really kind of go all over the place, but I have to say, some of my newest passion has been embroidery. I'll have to say,
Oh, how can you do that? I mean, I did it when I was young and it was hurt my eyes then.
right, and it's
Or
it's
threading a
only getting
needle. I
worse,
can't I
right?
can't imagine threading a needle. I tried to do that to sew on a button and I couldn't get it in the eye.
Exactly. I know it's impossible. And do I have the time or the energy half the time to do it? No, but I do love it, and they say that doing something with your hand
Mhm.
as a hobby helps to relax your brain.
Yeah.
And it takes pressure off of having to think
Yep.
um, for a minute, especially if you have a high stress job. So
Yep.
just even take a pottery class, something with your hands that like paint by. I got into paint by numbers during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Missy loves those.
I
Yeah.
couldn't even like do it anymore because I have too many. I was just like, what am I going to do with all of these, right? Um, but the best thing that I found, and so search this out if it's available to you, is there's a little craft studio down the street from me. She just opened up, and so not only is it just convenient if I'm able to stop by, but she does open studio hours. You
Oh,
can just go in and work on anything that you want,
that's
and
fun.
no one's bothering me, and it's very well lit, and she has magnifying glass, and she has
Oh,
all the tools
so
that
she
I can.
knows. She
That
knows her
yes,
target market.
yes, exactly. So you just don't feel so alone in your struggle. But I found that as a great tool. But it takes effort, just like anything,
Yeah.
right? Even hobbies take effort, and it's terrible to say, but you have to build time in for them if you want to get the benefit for them. And that is
Yeah.
something that we're definitely lacking.
Yeah.
I had a boss that used to say, "It's not time management; it's priority management."
It's
And that
true.
always stuck with me when I think,
Yeah.
"I don't have time for that." Nope, I'm just not prioritizing it. I'm not making it something that I'm building into my day,
That's true.
especially if it's for ourselves. It just goes down the list of
Yeah. It's the
importance, right?
last. It's last.
But it shouldn't be, and you just have to build it in if you don't want it to be.
I'm still thinking about the working with your hands. I took a knitting class in San Francisco because I think I had read that Julia Roberts did it.
You're right. Yeah,
And for
it
those
was like,
reasons, for the stress. And I
mhm.
found it so stressful to knit. It made me angry. I would get sweaty. My scarf looked like a Batman mask because it was a triangle with like three holes in it. It was,
Right.
yeah. So that maybe I need to pick that up again. Or
I think what's important is to do something that it does you feel you do feel good about. It shouldn't make you angry. That's
you know what I
probably not
did
the good.
do during COVID is I latch hooked, which was
Yeah.
actually, no mind thought. You just pick
No,
the
and
color.
that's the goal, right? It's an easy process, it's repetitive, you can't really mess it up, although I
I
could,
really
but
didn't know what to do with it after. I think I sent it. I made it into a pillow as a joke for friends. It was a fox. Mhm.
which is perfect.
Yes.
Maybe
Oh,
that's what I
yes.
should do with all my paint by numbers. So you'll get one in the mail.
Oh, great. Oh, goody. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I thought it
Thank you
was
so much for
really,
having me.
really important information and really, I think, educational for
Good,
me
I
and
hope it
for all
helps
my
someone.
listeners.
Yeah.